Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're glad to have you with us on this Thursday afternoon. We're here to talk about the 2022 renewal evaluations. There are some exciting new things we want to show you. I'm joined by my name is Shannon Quinn Sheeran from Housing Innovations. I'm joined by my colleagues Liz Isaacs and Lauren Peretti. And we are also joined today by our partners at Nutmeg, James Buckley, Tachika Murray, and Adam Yarna, and you'll hear from them later in this presentation. We're very excited to collaborate with them this year and to have them with us today. So before we start, I want to talk through some housekeeping things. If you have a question, you can unmute yourselves by clicking the little microphone icon next to your picture, or if you're in the next to your picture, it would be for you all. Or if you're on the phone, *6 to unmute yourselves, and then *6 again to mute yourselves. And we do ask, please, that you would mute yourselves if you're not speaking to cut down on background noise. I think that might be it. This, as I said in the beginning, the webinar is being recorded. It will be posted to our website within the next day or so. The slides are also posted to the website, and we'll get them put in the chat box in a little while here for you all to see as we move along. Our agenda: welcome and introductions, everything new and exciting for this year for the renewal evaluation. We'll walk through some of the criteria and then the schedule. There'll be time for questions. There's a slide on resources, and then we will move into Nutmeg, demonstrating the renewal evaluation data system. So we're going to do some breakout rooms here. We want you all, since we are not meeting in person so often these days, we want you all to have a more personal experience. Introduce yourselves to one another, see who you are, where you work for, what your role is, and answer the question. If you could effortlessly pick up a skill in an instant, what would it be? And feel free to be liberal. When I first read that question, I thought maybe by location, maybe speak any language in an instant at a time, be my own universal translator. So we'll put those questions in the chat and we'll do the breakout rooms here. Liz, are you able to do? I can do them. 60 people.
You get a little pop-up that prompts you to accept the breakout room. So if you want to move into a breakout room, you've got to click that little button, otherwise you'll remain here in the main room.
Thank you.
Can we pause the recording?
Yeah, I can. Is it still counting down?
It kicked us out.
Oh, you're totally okay. Okay, so everyone's back in the main room. All right, I hope you all had a good opportunity to meet each other and talk about interesting things with that introductions. So before we launch into the criteria, I just want to quick talk about why we do renewal evaluations. And a big part of why we do it is because HUD asks that COCs rank and evaluate projects, rank and rate projects every year as part of the HUD competition for funding. So this helps us as part of that process, and they want us to be transparent in that process too. So that's why we talk about everything that we talk about, and the steering committee votes on the criteria that we use every year. Also, it's a good opportunity for projects to look at your own data and what that says about your projects, and how your individual projects contribute to us as a system. And it helps us to look at a more granular level of how projects are performing in our system, and can help us inform who is going to keep on receiving funding and who's not in our COC. New and exciting, when we hope you all agree. And we did, as part of the PIT process this year, which was also more automated, we got positive feedback from that. So hopefully this will be the same thing. Providers now have direct access to your scored HMIS data in real time. So as part of this new process, new automated process, the criteria this year are significantly reduced. And we've tried to make them more in line with the data that you already input into HMIS. That's part of the reason for reducing the number of criteria that you're scored on. We'll talk about the database and you'll have a demonstration of the database later, but you'll be able to look at what your data says about your score in the data real time. And then of course, if there are edits to be made or there's something incorrect about what you're seeing in there, you will go back to HMIS to make those corrections. Here are links to the 2022 evaluation criteria. The scoring committee, sometimes we get questions about why we evaluate what we evaluate on, why we use this measure versus that measure. That's all presented and discussed at the steering committee. This past year, it was voted on in July. So usually right after we complete a renewal evaluation period, we start on the new evaluation and the new criteria. I neglected to say at the beginning, if there's anything that anyone wants to contribute, I know Annie maybe from CCADV might be here, or Katie from DOH might be here. So if there's something you want to add to what I'm saying, please feel free. So there are separate sets of criteria that are linked here for adult programs versus youth programs. Use those links to look at those more in detail. HMIS data. So the majority of items, as I said, are scored from HMIS data, helping streamline this process, hopefully for all of us. The reporting period, as it has been last year and possibly the year before, is 10/1 to 9/30. This period corresponds with system performance measure period. So if you've already been working on your data, you've already done some cleanup on your data for system performance measures. Even if you've done some cleanup for the PIT, like some projects have looked at their number of people in their program, some people have had to exit, they know they weren't in our program for PIT night. That's all going to help with this renewal evaluation process. Again, I just want to highlight, if your data is incorrect in the system, in the database that we're going to see today, you have to go back to HMIS to correct that data. Common pitfalls with HMIS data. So there are a few that we come upon every year. A really big one is missing annual assessments for program participants. So this doesn't apply to every project or every person in every project, but if a person is in a project or a household for 1 year or more, then an annual assessment needs to be completed for that household. And that is where a lot of the income information we get for this report comes from. So it's really important that those annual assessments be completed, and they're due at the household's anniversary of entering the program. Check also, it sounds silly, but check to be sure the program showing the correct number of people, the program showing the correct number of people in it. We may have missed entering someone, there may be data entry lags, or we may have exited someone a couple months ago and not gotten around to updating that in HMIS. So look at the number of participants. And then another pitfall is just not being aware of your data and what that says about what's going on in your program. So it's a good idea to periodically look at it, see what it's telling you, if where your people came from, where they're exiting to, ensure that those annual assessments are done, and the basic demographic makeup of your project. It's a good idea to look at all of that regularly. Performance. So we want to look at utilizing COC funding as fully and efficiently as possible. There are specific criteria for the larger projects here, that they must spend at least 95% of the funding that they get for their program. There's specific criteria for projects that get under 100,000, and we want them to spend at least 90% of the funds. For all other projects, spending is set at least 95%. New projects, SRO, sub-projects, or transfer projects are all excluded from this metric. And for YHDP projects, we're going to use the second year spending data. Another important item to look at how we're optimizing our capacity and using this funding responsibly is occupancy. So for occupancy, we want the rate to be 90%, and that's based on quarterly utilization. And then specifically for YHDP, crisis TH, and youth PSH, they are allowed to have up to 1 empty bed per quarter. Housing stability, we want people to enter housing and either stay housed or exit to permanent housing. So for PSH, we look at people who either remain in the project or those who exited the project, and we want that to be at 95% in order to get full points. For the rest, we look at just exits. We don't look at remaining in the project. So rapid rehousing, transitional housing, we want 95% to exit to permanent housing. Youth rapid rehousing and diversion rapid exit, 85% exits to PH. Youth crisis TH, 60% exit to PH, and youth rapid diversion rapid exit crisis TH. We want them to have a less than 5% exit to homelessness rate. Non-cash benefits. Participants, we want to know that 95% of participants are receiving non-cash benefits. This is minus health insurance. And that rate is 76% for DV projects. This item is not scored for YHDP. Length of stay, for regular rapid rehousing projects, this item is collected and not scored, but it is scored for these projects listed here. So for DV transitional housing, full points for participants staying 2 years or less. Youth TH, stay is 1 year or less, and YHDP crisis transitional housing, 60 days or less. Earned income is collected but not scored for many projects. It is scored for the items listed here. So youth projects except YHDP, diversion, rapid exit, we want to see 20% of the participants increase income from entry to exit or follow-up. I think I'm going to hand it over to Liz.
Yes, so I'm going to continue on the criteria with the consumer surveys. Next slide. So the scoring criteria for the consumer surveys, if you get 35% response rate, you can get the maximum points available. So this year for the consumer surveys, we extended the time period. So they were due the 14th. We let everybody have till the 28th. So anything we received after the 28th could not be considered for evaluation. And then folks get a 5-point penalty if we don't get any surveys at all. Lateness, we're going to this last slide on penalties, and then we're moving ahead. So 5 points deducted if you were late with, this year we did an agency survey. So if that was late, there are 5 points deducted. But wait, this is where the good news is starting, and then it's just going to continue. So you were going to have 2 points deducted if you didn't get a chance to get into ZenGen to update or change your contacts. Turns out a lot of people weren't able to do that. We recognize it's been a rough year for folks. There's a lot being thrown at people. In terms of communicating, we probably could have communicated this better. So people are not losing 2 points. But what we'd love in return is for folks after this webinar to hop in ZenGen and update the contacts. Oh, and I love Sylvia. I'm kind of catching the chat below. Sylvia wants 2 extra points. So I love it. I love that Sylvia always, has a suggestion. And Sylvia, as you know, we set the criteria in the spring and summer, and you're able to bring that suggestion to the steering committee. I like it moving in that direction. Whether you lose points or gain points next year, please update your contacts. It's just really important that we're contacting the right people and we're not sending emails and communication to folks who no longer work at your agency. And I don't need to tell you all, there's lots of staff turnover. Maybe that'll change, but it's really important to us. So
there's links for Zengen later in the slides too.
Yes. We'll make sure you know how to do that. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
All good. So we're going to talk a little bit about the process and the timeline. So new this year, which is fun, you can submit a support request. And you're going to do it in the data system, and our friends at Nutmeg are going to tell you how to do it. So you're going to want to pay attention. You guys may recall we've had the scoring change requests in the past. So that's gone. And this replaces it. And then because this is magic, the system, it's like the Jetsons, it's going to tell Nutmeg if you have a problem with technology. It's going to tell Housing Innovations, us, if you have an issue with the process. So hopefully we're going to streamline it. Our goal is like no more random emails, right? That's one of our mini goals, but hopefully this will help out. And then if you need to do some stuff in HMIS, cleaning up that data, there's going to be a link that you magically click on, and it's going to lead you to be able to communicate with the help desk. So again, Nutmeg is going to show us how to do this in a few minutes. I'll stop rambling soon. So really pay attention to this. Again, we're really hoping this streamlines the system and makes it easier for you. Okay. We will continue to have a grievance process. It's going to look a little bit different on how you submit your grievances. So when the reports are final, you're going to have the ability to go again into the data system, and you're going to get to submit a grievance and explain what's going on within the data system. And just like in the past, we're going to have the Grievance Committee meet. They will probably meet sometime in May. And a couple things to keep in mind. What we can't look at with grievance is standards that have already been set, right? Criteria that the steering committee has decided on, because that's just sort of not fair. So you may really not like the criteria or think it's not fair, which is valid. And the best thing to do is, make a note. And then again, in the spring and the summer, when we come together, let's have a conversation with the steering committee about it. But unfortunately, we can't address it at this time. Also, we're going to talk a little bit about deadlines. Like in the next slide or two, data issues that weren't corrected in time, unfortunately, we can't take those on because it would just be a never-ending process. So those two things, please keep in mind, but you do have the ability, as you have in the past, to grieve.
I just want to say one thing real quick, Liz.
Yeah.
So on the first point that Liz just made there about not being able to grieve the standard, what we don't want is to have it be different standards are used for different folks, or some standards are applied to some folks and aren't applied to other folks, right? So we don't want to say like this is the standard unless you submit a grievance, and then you're going to be evaluated by a different standard, right? So that's really kind of the reason behind that. Everyone gets evaluated by those same standards. Those standards are transparent, are established. Everybody has an opportunity to have a voice into those standards at the point in time that they're being established. But once they're established, it's not really fair to have a different standard apply to, a particular project.
Yep. That's a good point. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the timeline. So you may remember, feels like a long time ago, in June, folks were able to access paper consumer surveys. In the past, people have said, please give us some more time. We anticipate doing that again. So look out for paper surveys. It'll be June 2022 before we know it. And then it'll be the 2023 consumer surveys. It seems impossible to say. Back in July, we adopted the criteria. And then back in January, folks submitted your surveys and your agency surveys through SurveyMonkey. Next. We're almost at the present. We are at the present. So this is today. Yay. Doing our launch webinar. We're really excited. I know we don't get out much that this is like, this is the best thing that's ever happened to us, this technology. You're going to love it too, when you say. And in April, so these are really important deadlines. Please focus on them if you can. So the 14th of April is the final day, the last time for you to submit the support requests that we talked about. Remember, those are the things if you need something changed. And the last day for you to submit the renewal evaluation Hmis data cleanup tickets. So it's not the first day that you start it, but it's the last day that you can submit it. So the first day, woo, today. But please take a look early and often to make sure that happens. Because we do, again, we just have to stay on a timeline. We have to have deadlines. We don't do it to be mean. So the other really important deadline is the 26th of April, because this is your last chance to make changes in Hmis that will impact your score. So as always, you can go in and make changes and do what you need to, but the 26th of April is the last day you can make changes to impact your score. And then on the 27th, that's it. You have a final score. And then in May, sometime there will be, we'll let you know, we don't know quite yet, there'll be a deadline for you to be able to submit grievances. Questions, comments, concerns? Kim is asking, do all annual assessments have to be made by these deadlines? Yes. As long as they are due, right? So if once an annual assessment is due for that time period, then yes. And then I see Sylvia's note about wanting the 2 points. I don't see anything else. Does anyone have?
Annie has her hand.
Yeah. What's happening, Annie?
I have a question, Liz, and feel free to tell me if this is not the right time to ask these questions. But I had questions about and I know I actually emailed one of them to Adam about the actual like how some of these numbers are calculated. So the first one I just wanted to confirm for occupancy each quarter. Are you looking at, like, do you take all 4 quarters and then average them? Is that how you determine occupancy? So that was my first question. And then my second question was, and Miles and I went back and forth a lot last year because I didn't understand this last year either. For the non-cash benefits, I never understand who you're pulling. Like, are you pulling everyone, or are you pulling everyone who's had an annual or an exit? Because people at entry oftentimes don't have them because they haven't worked with the case manager yet.
Hi, I'll answer both questions.
Oh.
This is Miles, if people don't recognize me. I don't get out anymore. If you ever watch 9 to 5, they lock me down in the basement, chained to the desk. But the first question, occupancy, we base it on, okay, first we base it on the households for each quarter. So there's a question in the APR, question 8B. I would say point in time at the end of the last Wednesday of each quarter. I think it was a January, April, July, and October. You'll have the number of households were served. And in this case, the APR only picks served that were actually housed. So there's a little bit difference nowadays than it used to be. So we take that. We average it out for the 4 months. So if you had 10, 15, 10, and 15, it'll be 12.5 for the full year. And then we divide it by your how many units your application has. So if you applied for 10 units, then it's 12.5 divided by 10 equals 125%. So you're above and you're doing good. So reminder, I just was saying that the units is what your application states. So you could go over the application and you're being counted for as a positive in this scenario. For your, what was it, non-cash benefits? For non-cash benefits, this gets a little more trickier the way the database is going to work now. But for projects that are non-DV, and they're in the Hmis system, we are taking all the participants that are who exited the program, and also taking all the participants that are due an annual assessment. So if anyone that was a new participant for the for the 12 months. They came in during that operating year. They had not to do an annual assessment. They will be excluded from the formula. And then because the HMIS is slightly different, they're actually checking your actual data per client and pulling that information. For the DV project, which unfortunately we would not have your data in a sense because you're only pulling APR. The APR is going to do the same thing, but it's pulling from the question 18, where it tells you how many adult participants are not due for an annual assessment. So it's kind of a workaround, which we always did in the past with the scoring. So if that's incorrect, that gets a little more trickier because that will have to be fixed in the database one way or the other or something like that. So, but for the HMIS projects, they're going individually per person. So if you had an annual assessment done or is missing an annual assessment, it's going to take that into account for income and non-cash benefits. So I'm answering both at the same time for anyone asking about income as well.
Excellent.
I think that's,
Thank you. Thanks, Miles.
Yep, I think that was it.
There's a question in the chat. So we don't get credit for people who are enrolled but not yet housed. Is that true?
For occupancy, that's right. So for occupancy, the way that the APR works, it's that it's based upon who's housed, not who's enrolled.
All right. Liz,
Great.
I think you're up.
Okay, and the last couple slides here are on resources. So everything you wanted to know and didn't want to know about renewal evaluation, you can go to the BOS website and check that out. It's got all of these things listed, and it's got the ZenGen training, and that has instructions on how to update your contact information. So check it out, please. And then the second page of resources, the first bullet is the Grant Renewal Evaluator Provider Guide. So Nutmeg put this together. This should be really helpful and provide guidance on what we're going to talk about today. So you'll have that moving ahead. And then we just gave links on how to run your APR and APR information, because that's always good to have as you drill down and want to see what's happening with your data. So, next slide. And then the last slide is just how to contact us. Don't suffer silently. Reach out. Let us know what's going on, and we'll help out, or we'll send you to Nutmeg and have them help you out. I think that is it. Before we turn it over to Nutmeg, are there questions? Anything on?
I'm just going to mention something real quick. If you do not see your project, definitely put a help desk ticket. There's going to be a couple of projects that are probably going to be missing due to quirks in ZenGen, which I'll be working with Shannon to resolve. But on the most part, we should be good to go.
Great. Thanks, Miles. I'm going to stop sharing, and I think Adam is going to share his screen.
All right. Yep, Adam can do that. Good afternoon, everyone. Adam, I do the programming work for Nutmeg, so I'll be stepping you through the process. Thank you for the overview that you provided and some of the other background there leading up to this.
We're excited to have you here.
Myself. Before I forget, I would like to note that I saw that you had read a couple of questions in chat from people that I do not see in the chat thing. I see some of them, but not all of them. I don't know if that has anything to do with the breakout. The reason I mention that is because if anybody has a question and you type it in the chat and it seems like I am pointedly ignoring you, it's because I have not seen it and I am not ignoring you.
We'll try to point them out to you, Adam.
Okay, yep, that would be great.
Adam, I corrected that. You'll find this hard to imagine. It was a user error on my part. There was something odd checked, but it's not.
I refuse to believe that.
Thanks, Bo. Bo fixed it. Bo told me about it. So we should be fine. Everyone should be seeing everything.
Okay, excellent. That is good. Okay, so we're going to do kind of a quick run through of the system you'll be able to use this year to do the renewal evaluation process. And I just want to kind of let you know now that if you have any questions along the way that seem relevant to what I'm talking about at the moment, then feel free to interrupt, put the hand up, ask the question in chat, speak up, etc. If it's something you think doesn't need to be addressed until the very end, that's fine. But by all means, please interrupt if you have a question or need clarification on something that it is not rude. It is highly encouraged. I'm going to share my screen here and make sure everybody can see it okay. I have tried to remember that I have a bigger screen than most people do, so I'm trying to make sure that I don't make this look too small so everybody can see it okay. All right, so for those of you not on a phone, you able to see that all right?
Yes.
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, all right. So theoretically, this should be a pretty basic, straightforward overview. And like I said, just interrupt if you have any questions or anything, but there's not too much complexity to it, hopefully. So you all currently have been using Zengen or some number of you, to update your contact information and such. For everybody who is a contact in Zengen, that same email address has been imported into this system that you'll be able to log in with. Now, we don't know what your passwords are, as we shouldn't. So when you first go to log into the system, you are going to need to use the forgot your password link so that it can email you a link that you can use to set a new password. So some of you have already done that who have logged into here previously for some early testing, but most of you will need to do that for the first time you log in. So that would be the same email address that you have in Zengen for a contact. I'm going to use a test thing to log in with for the purpose of going through here, so that I can kind of see everything to show you all at once. This up a bit here. There we go. All right. So once you have gotten as far as logging into the system, you will see this link here that says My Projects. This is going to be the thing that lists for you all of the projects that you have access to in the system. For the purpose of this demo, I get to see everybody, not because I'm special, but because I'm lazy and it's easier to do it this way. So you will see any number of projects that you have, the grant number, project name, all that kind of general information. And you have some of those key timeline dates up on the corner of the screen here that were on the slide before. So easy reference there. And for those of you who are actual users and not me, you will see in this spot here a list of the service provider contacts, which should match what's in Zengen and should reflect who the contact people should be. So if that is incorrect, there is a link there to the support page where you can report that is incorrect. Once you have gotten to this page and you see your list of projects, then I see a thing in the chat there. Oh, okay. Yep. Thank you, Lauren. You'll see that your status for your projects initially is going to be awaiting submission. That means that it needs some of your attention, has not been scored yet. I'll bring that up. So the first time you go to see a project, you're going to get a notice that some action is needed, that you need to complete a grant assessment review. That is a process where you can confirm the operating year for your project. It's kind of explained on here what that's going to be. So it's going to list for you your grant period, and this is based on what's been entered in Zengen. So this is your chance to confirm that the dates are or are not accurate, and that will notify Housing Innovations if it's not accurate so that it can be corrected. For now, we'll just assume that they are. And it will list which HMIS projects are associated with this grant. This should be correct. Certainly, if it is not, let us know. We'll answer whether it is or is not accurate. That also will alert Housing Innovations and let them know if that is the case. And then you can submit your grant for review. And that begins the process of getting a snapshot of all of your HMIS data and your spending data and the survey data, all the other stuff that goes into the process of getting a score for your project.
Adam,
Yes, yep.
we've got a question in the chat box before you move on, if you don't mind.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, sure. So the question is from Amanda, and it says, is there a way that people that are not program contacts in Zengen can get access to the system?
Yes. And I think I will leave that up to you, Lauren, or somebody at Housing Innovations to let us know what you want the process for that to be, who would, you know, approve access to it and let us know what projects they should see, but that is possible.
So I think if I remember correctly, Adam, and you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, is that we in our team functionality have the ability to just add users in, right?
That is correct.
So I think the process should be that people, you can file a support ticket, which Adam's going to show in a minute in the system. And then those will be routed to HI and HI can add you. Does that make sense, Adam?
That does make sense. Yep.
Okay. So we just need to make sure that we don't want to give willy-nilly, you know, people who are not authorized, right, to have access to programs data in here. So as long as, you know, we know that you're are in fact legitimately, you know, employed by that agency, we will give you access to the data.
All right, thanks for bringing that to my attention. You have no idea how many windows I have open on both of my screens over here, so it's hard to keep track of everything at the same time. So I appreciate that. All right, so once your project has been scored, you get some additional information that shows up on here now. You'll see that the status indicates it's been scored. It shows how many points are available for your project type. This changes in some cases because different projects are excluded from certain criteria. So the maximum number of points that are available may not be the same between all programs or all projects for that reason. And it'll show how many points were awarded, how many penalties there are, and then what the final score is. So I'll run through here and kind of summarize it and then stop to check for any additional questions on there. So what you'll see here is a list of the different criteria that apply to this type of project. I do see a question in here. How can an organization be responsible for spending of a large rental assistance program? That I think is going to be a Housing Innovations thing to answer.
I can take that. I'm not sure what JDA SPC is, Sylvia, but for where there are sub projects on, like, so it's a big statewide PSH project, and Hmis is this
Shelter Plus Care.
Yeah, no, I know SPSC. I just don't know what JDA is.
J. D'Amelia.
I'm not sure if that's a COC project. Anyway, let me answer it. And then if I didn't answer it,
J. D'Amelia, who pays all the rents.
Yeah. No, I understand that. I just don't know which specific project that is that you're talking about. Anyway, the answer to your question, I think, is that when it's a large project, right? Either a large DOH project that has, you know, rapid rehousing project that has 30 subrecipients on it or 10 subrecipients on it, or the same side on the Hmis side with PSH, that sub projects are not evaluated on the spending criteria. So they're that criteria is excluded for those projects. You won't be evaluated on that.
Good. Thank you very much, because ours showed points. Ours showed negative points on there. We lost 15 points. So I just want to make sure it doesn't happen. That's okay.
And if it's not working correctly, we'll fix it before it goes final. So, but that's the intent, that if it's a large project with multiple sub projects, the sub project recipient shouldn't be scored.
Yeah, that was a work in progress, and that's probably not up and ready yet. So you can see it's showing 0. That should be NA on this project because we're not scoring this project for spending. That was just worked out this week, so I don't think the programming's in there yet.
Great. I know Lee had her hand up. Lee, do you have a question?
Response to Sylvia's or comment was just to say that each of the projects has a proportional allocation of rental assistance dollars that they are traditionally responsible for spending down. So I don't know if that gets factored into this particular screen, but we at DOH know what the proportional allocation is that each subrecipient is responsible for.
We don't know that. We only know the number of people we are supposed to serve.
In this case, if it's going to pull a number, it's going to pull the full grant amount. So you'll see.
Guys, we're not scoring this for sub-projects, so let's just, like, we can figure out like that, all this maybe offline, but this item is not getting scored for sub-projects for this year at least, and we can reconsider that in the future if we want to, but for this year at least, it's not getting scored for sub-projects.
Okay, all right, thanks for the clarification there.
Sure.
So this will show any of the criteria that apply to this particular project. There are some criteria that only apply to certain project types. Those will not be shown here and not scored. There is a link up here, and I hope you can all see me moving my mouse on the screen here, but there is a link under the performance tab here where it has links to the adult and the youth scoring criteria documents. These are, actually, I'll just bring them up in here. The scoring criteria from Housing Innovations that have the full breakdown of what the criteria is, what the different scoring tiers are, how many points are available, notes about various exclusions and conditions and such. So if you need the full breakdown, that is available on there. And there's the one for the youth criteria also, which has some variance, but is in many ways similar. So you'll see each of the scoring criteria. You'll see if a benchmark standard was met, what scoring tier it was. So you know how many points you get for it. Tier 1 is the maximum number of points. Tier 2, the second level of points, etc. It'll show what the performance metric was. For example, on this item, the percentage of leavers who exited to permanent housing, 84% met in this case. So that meets the tier 3 scoring for greater than 80%, and that awards the points. There are numerous items on those scoring criteria that are measured, but this year are not scored. So that is identified on here as indicating it's not scored. So it doesn't count for or against you, but those are criteria that presumably will be used in the future, is my understanding. So you'll get the—
They may or may not be used in the future, right? We're just keeping our eye on them, and whether or not they'll be used in the future is up to the steering committee.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. So then you get your the totals for the points that were awarded, and any penalties that were applied for the late documents or late contacts being updated, as was discussed earlier. And then you get the final score from that. There's also the program details page here, which has additional information, shows what the HMIS projects that are involved in here were. There is a block here that says Apr Data Score. This will, I believe tomorrow, show the individual score for each HMIS program. So if your project is made of 5 different HMIS projects, you'll be able to see the data score for each one individually. So you can see which one may be the source of bad data or needs more attention. And then for the project overall, you'll see the various information such as if it's the first time this project is being reviewed, which if it is the first year, there are some of the criteria that don't apply. If it's being scored as a youth program or a DV project, you get your grant start and end dates, spending information, and a couple other details pertaining to the data quality, as was being discussed earlier, with the number of participants and households, how many people left, the number of people who didn't have a required assessment or who don't have one due yet, etc. So that information should help give you an idea what needs to be cleaned up if there's any bad data. And I'll show you how to go about that. So first I'll pause and see if there's any questions on there I need to have brought to my attention that we have so far. All right, then I will continue until someone tells me otherwise. So if you see that you have scored not well on an item due to bad data in HMIS, for example, people missing assessments, etc., and you go into HMIS and get that data corrected, you can use the button up here to update your score based on the current data. Now, this date here that says date effective for data, that indicates when the HMIS data was pulled out of there to generate the score. So you can see when that was. If you use this button here, after you have cleaned up data in HMIS, maybe fixed up some missing assessments, it will rescore using the new information so that you can get that taken care of before the final deadline there. There is on the support page that I'll show to you an option, as was mentioned earlier, for contacting the HMIS help desk in order to get assistance with data cleanup. On the top of the screen here, there's a support button. That will bring you to a page where you can contact us for various support options. So there is a note here. There's a special link that was mentioned earlier for assistance with HMIS data cleanup. That brings you to the same site that you're probably already familiar with on the CTHMIS website, where you can enter all the information you need to submit a help desk ticket for assistance with the data cleanup. For any other issues that you run into on the system, you can use this page. You can pick which item you need help with. If you got an error message with the system, questions about the evaluation criteria, questions about the scoring or projects being evaluated, or a project is missing that you think should be there or isn't there that should be, something else, etc. You can select your topic there. If it relates to a particular grant project, this list will show you which grant projects that you have access to, so you can identify that if that is relevant. And then you enter your information there, submit the support request, and that will get emailed either to the Nutmeg help desk or to Housing Innovations, or to there's another option here for DV, has a different destination also. We'll go to the appropriate party so that you can get a response back from that as quickly as we can. So that will direct your questions to the proper recipient there.
I want to interject real quick here, Adam. Sure. This is James from Nutmeg. It's very important that when you use this form, under the topics/subject section, you choose the one that most correctly matches the item. There is another category that should be, there's something else category that should be your use of last resort, because it will slow down our response to you, because we have to have a discussion about what that issue is. It may have to be routed, as an extra step. So really take your time with each issue, and if you can, choose the correct one. We also have a note there about multiple issues, that if you have 2 or 3 different issues, even on the same program, but they're distinctly different items, that we urge you to use them to file a request for each one individually rather than combining them. It's a little bit slower initially to submit, but you'll get your resolutions faster, and we'll be able to track things in a much cleaner, more efficient way. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, James. That is a good point. Since some of these topics get routed to different people, like some of these might go to Housing Innovation, some go to us. If you put multiple questions all on the same thing, then whoever it goes to has to figure out who the other parts or other questions went to, and that just slows the process down a bit. So thanks for clarifying that.
And also one further clarification that Tushika reminded me of, which is to only use this form for any issues related to the application, not to use our standard help desk email for this app. And then we have that link again for the data cleanup, which you use exclusively. So either this form or the data cleanup form, not a typical help desk ticket that you might be used to for other HMIS things. Thanks.
All right, thank you for that. I did see there was a question there regarding the dates, and I will point out that on your provider information page, those key dates are all located on the top right here, as well as the HMIS reporting period that's used. That is available there, and that is also listed on the process overview tab here. Nope, I'm mistaken about the data, the HMIS data dates. All the other dates are located on this page.
So I just want to say that it says in there that the grievance deadline date is 5/11. I think Nutmeg's going to work on fixing that. The date for grievance is to be determined. We haven't yet established the grievance date. It probably is going to be on or around 5/11, but we don't know that for sure. We want to make sure that everything is working well and that we get any issues cleaned up before we decide what the grievance deadline should be. And then there's another question in the chat, Adam, that relates
About the DB?
Yeah.
Yep, I see that one. That was my next item here. So let me find a DV project in here. Here we go. So for DV projects who do not have their data in HMIS, when you go to submit your initial data for it, the process is a little bit different. You will still have the option for confirming the operating year, but there will not be a list of HMIS program IDs to confirm. There will be a box on top here that asks you to upload an APR. So when you run an APR out of whichever system is being used, you will attach that file here. And I do believe that I have one. So let me try to.
While Adam's doing that, I just want to be clear for everyone. This is only if you are a designated DV service provider and you are not using HMIS and you are using a comparable database instead, which is actually, I think, not the case for Florian, who asked the question. So this process that Adam is showing is only for projects that are not using HMIS, only the comparable database. And Florian will answer your question in just a second.
Okay, yes, that is correct, that this only shows up for programs that are identified as DV projects in Zengen. So if your project is incorrectly categorized as DV or not, then you can submit a support request to have that corrected. So in this case, the process ends up being the same for doing the scoring data, except it uses the APR file that you uploaded instead of pulling it from HMIS, but otherwise gets you to the same spot with the scoring data. The criteria are slightly different for some DB projects. That's all reflected on the scoring summary sheet here. And the information for that on the program details is also populated from the APR. Functionally, the process is the same, whether an APR is used to supply the data or if it comes out of HMIS. Aside from that extra step of having to upload the APR, everything else is identical. The same data is pulled. It looks the same on here. There's not any other functional difference to it. With the exception that whereas on an HMIS program, you can just click the button to get new refreshed HMIS data after cleanup. If it's a DB project that uses APRs, then you will have to reattach the APR file up here. So there's the option to attach that file here. So you just run a new report, attach that, and then the process there is the same also. Does that make sense and answer that question, or is there a follow-up to that?
It does make sense. I think the question is a little different, Adam. So I'm glad you showed that though, because that was important. The question is, I think, and the questioner will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's a project that does use HMIS, but they have a DV survivor in there. They're not a DV service provider, so they're using HMIS. There's a particular client who is, has a DV safety concern and therefore is entered as anonymous in the HMIS system. And so they would just want to make sure that there's no penalty for that anywhere here in the scoring. And I believe the answer to that is no, there is no penalty. Doesn't matter whether or not the client is entered anonymously, their data still pulls into the same way. Is that correct?
That is correct as far as how we pull the data for HMIS projects. I think the only difference to that would be whether an APR includes those people if they don't have a date of birth or something. But since we're talking about HMIS projects here who would not be uploading the APR directly, then those clients should be included in the count of all the like the person served and household served and such.
Last year, we had a standard that that if you had a DV client and that would affect you, because we don't, DVs don't have Social Security and so on and so forth. This year, we're not scoring that, so there'll be no issue this year.
Thanks, Miles.
All right, so once you have gone through the process of cleaning up any HMIS data if needed, and Housing Innovations issues their final scores next month, at that point, you'll be able to file a grievance if you disagree with the score. I have enabled the button to show up on here for now for this demo. It will not be available after today until the scores are finalized. But for the purpose of showing you what that will look like in the meantime, so you can kind of get a heads up on how that's gonna operate. If you disagree with a scoring item, you can click that button. It will show all the items that your project was scored on, what the performance was, the number of points that were associated, and you can enter a description for any item that you had that you wish to file a grievance against. You can put a separate description for each item that you had an issue with, and there's items on the bottom here as well for the penalty items, for the context penalty, lateness penalty. So once you describe any issues or complaints that you have with that, you submit that grievance, and that will get sent to Housing Innovations. Come down to here. All right, I don't have any good ideas in mind for what to submit as a grievance, so I will just identify that as random. So that will indicate that the score has been aggrieved. It'll indicate that there is however many grievances or however many scoring items had a grievance filed for them. In this case, there's the one here, and then Housing Innovations would be notified of that, so that the steering committee or that the Grievance Committee can review those items. Once Housing Innovations has made a determination, or the Grievance Committee rather has made a determination on how to address those particular grievances, those will be reflected in the scores, and you'll be notified via the email address of your contact information that a decision has been made, so that you'll be able to see that, and your score will be adjusted accordingly if there is any adjustment to be made as a result of that. But again, the grievance option you will not be able to see until final scoring is done. So don't expect to see this until when? Until the date on here. Yes, so final submissions due on the 26th. So on the 27th, when your scores are finalized, that button will become available for you.
In the meantime, you'll use the support request feature that Adam just went through, right? So if there's anything you see that you think is wrong now, you're going to use that support request feature. And then once we've gone through all of those and we've resolved everything that we think needs to be resolved, if you're still dissatisfied at that point, then on the 27th, starting on the 27th, you would use the grievance feature.
Yes, that is correct. Thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, up until these scores are finalized, if you see something where you believe the score was calculated wrong or you have any other issues with it, then yes, the support page will let you contact us so that we can address any of those issues beforehand and make sure that everything is reported as you believe it should be, so that they can issue their final scores.
We've got 2 questions too in the chat that came in.
All right, let's see. This data, this application does not upload anything to eSnaps. I don't, does Housing Innovations do anything with that on their end?
Yeah, so eSnaps is a HUD system, guys, and we don't have any ability to do any kind of uploads or anything into eSnaps, and I don't suspect that will ever change, right? That's a federal system and we don't have any control over it. And then on the second question, yes, we will definitely send out the link to the recording today from the presentation, all the resources, as well as, actually, Adam, everybody's going to get an email, right, that has the link to log into the system. Is that correct?
That seems like the best way to do it. I don't know that we had discussed how that was going out, but I think emailing everybody who is contacting here at the moment, unless you had a specific list you wanted us to use.
The same way that we did for the testers.
Okay, yep, that sounds like a
Yeah,
great
so
option.
everybody will get an email with the link to the system. Everybody that's a registered user in Zengen will get an email for a link to the system that's auto-generated through the system. And again, if you need access to the system and you don't have access to the system, Adam, are they going to be able to access the support feature if they've not logged in?
Yes, that is a good question. If you are not logged into the system, you can still access the support page. So that would be helpful if you're having problems logging in. Because you're not logged in, the system does not know who you are, and it does not know what projects you have access to provide that list. And then you'll need to provide your email address so that you can be replied to. So some of that being pre-filled in is not available, obviously, when you're not logged in. But otherwise, the support page functions the same way.
So even if you don't have a login, you can contact us if you think you should have a login, and we will add you as a user.
Exactly, yes.
And the reason for doing it all through this form is that it just makes it much easier for us to keep track of everything and make sure that we've resolved all your issues promptly, instead of getting 5,000 emails.
Yes, nobody likes having a flooded inbox. Regarding the initial scores, I know that several of you have logged in to here previously during the early testing process. And we have made some changes to the scoring, which changed some of the data that is initially collected that would make it not possible to simply rescore that same data with the revised scoring. So for those of you who had already submitted during the testing process, those scores are not in the system now that the system is live. So you will need to generate new scores, and that will use the corrected finalized version of the scoring criteria. So if you don't see your information in there, that is expected.
And I just want to, I put this in the chat, but I just want to say out loud, thank you to all of our testers. We really appreciate, there were a handful of agencies that helped us to test this system in advance to get it ready for you all, and their time and their input is deeply, deeply valued. So thank you, thank you.
Yes, that was great information that we got back, both feedback and finding some corrections that needed to be made. So we do appreciate the time and effort that you put into that. All right, so I think that that basically summarizes all of this. There's not a whole lot of complexity to it, which is kind of by design, trying to make this as simple as possible for everyone. So hopefully just a few clicks here and there, and you should have your data submitted and be all done with this. But does anybody have any questions currently that I have not yet seen or addressed?
I just want to mention something. If you noticed in there that certain things were scored when it shouldn't be scored, that's going to be fixed where it's going to say NA. But right now it's that was something being worked on. So if you notice something like you didn't have any clients that have annual assessments, like the Access Agency had 0 clients for annual assessments because none are due, that any scoring criteria that deals with that will be NA, and then your score will be prorated going forward. Yes, so.
Another thing that I'm not sure we noted, I'm sorry if you said this, Adam, and I'm repeating it, but we had a little glitch with the YHDP consumer survey data. And so we're going to be, and right now, if you're a YHDP project, when you initially log in, it'll look like you didn't submit any consumer surveys. We're aware of that problem, and we're working to address it. So Housing Innovations won't be able to enter that information until you've done your initial submission. So once you do your initial submission, we'll enter that information, and then that'll be scored. And then we'll fix that moving forward. But we just had a little 11th hour glitch there.
Also on that, the YWCA's 2 projects also won't show up there because due to miscommunication on that one, the survey is not entered in SurveyMonkey yet, so it's going to pull zeros right now. And there's a few projects because of with the SurveyMonkey having duplicate surveys, it didn't know what to pull. So they probably going to show zeros as well at this point in time. So if you run it today, you might see some of those not showing properly. So
we'll get all this stuff cleaned up super quick, guys, and we won't go through because there's just like little marginal like tweaks that we're doing still, but we won't go through them all now because most of them only impact like 1 or 2 programs, and it will all be cleaned up quickly.
And I will like to point out that when Housing Innovations does any cleanups, for example, getting some of the surveys in, or if there was something with spending data, et cetera, they are then able to refresh your score using the same HMIS information you had submitted or had been captured when you had submitted it. So you will not have to come in and rescore your project again once, for example, those surveys are put into the system. That will get scored for you, so you will not have to take extra steps for that.
One note I think Adam did mention is if your project's not being scored, it will say not scored on that list. So there's a few projects that are listed will be in the system, but we're not scoring them, such as the youth navigators who all do not score.
We have a question. Oh, go ahead, Lauren.
No, I was going to do the same thing. You do it.
So we have a question. Where do we log in for this? Zengen or HMIS? And so I think we decided you're going to get an email, which will give you the information so that you can log into this system, into this data system.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yep. And then another question, will another set of dates be offered for eSnaps along with dates that documents need to be dropped in Zengen, updated con plan? Elaine, you're like making me start to twitch. I love it though. She's thinking NOFO, but that's okay. Somebody has to, Elaine. No, that's great. All good questions. We will send out information when it's time to get to sort of the next steps, but we are not there yet. So, but we will definitely communicate that. But I know now this is all I talk about is Zengen contacts. If you have not updated your Zengen contacts, that should be done ASAP.
So all the competition stuff, we don't do until HUD drops the NOFO, right? And HUD hasn't dropped the NOFO yet. And we don't anticipate that HUD's going to drop the NOFO until, who knows, but probably at the earliest, July, we think. Yep. But we never know. HUD does it when HUD does it.
One other thing I'd like to point out before I forget, I meant to mention this earlier. On the support page, there is a link to any known issues and the current status of the system. So for example, the issue with some of those surveys not being in place yet, we'll make sure that that gets put onto this list. So you'll all be able to see if the issue you're having is something that is known and what its current status is. We also will have the link to this recorded training here. Obviously not until after we're done recording it. And there's also a how-to guide, which is a document we've put together that will contain sort of a step-by-step walkthrough of how to use the system. It'll have screenshots and other information. So hopefully it's easy enough that you won't need that. But if you do have any questions or trying to figure something out, there's a good chance it'll be answered there on the how-to guide. And then certainly anything that's not answered there, feel free to contact us. And we will be keeping an eye on that to make sure if there's any issues that come in, especially if it relates to something not being scored correctly, that we will get taken care of to make sure that that is corrected as quickly as possible. And any such corrections should apply to everybody and will not be requiring you to go in and rescore your data repeatedly. Just about any issue or scoring correction that would need to be made should be able to be made without you having to go in and refresh your data.
Hey, this is James, and I wanted to drop a brief note on this app as we kind of roll this out for usage. So this app, as kind of was mentioned before, is draws data from the HMI system in real time to look at the data. I just want to mention that as we get our first users using the system, with any system, there's always a possibility of maybe too much traffic initially as all 100 people hit the same application at the same time and potentially slow down the system, because it does got the data from our main system and to do its calculations. We have a message that will show if that happens, if the system is a little bit slow. And if that does happen, just take 15 minutes, take 30 minutes, step away for a little while, come back and try it again later. Nothing will be harmed. And it should generally work without issue. Just the initial floodgates as they open may temporarily make the system a little busier than usual. I just want to give you guys a heads up. Now, it's typical with any kind of software application launch, no matter how big or small the system. So I just want to let you be aware of that possibility. And you may never see the error and it may work perfectly fine for you, but just want to kind of put that out there.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I missed that bullet point. I'm trying to go over and look and see what I what I had missed. But yeah, if too many people try running, since the system runs an APR in the background to pull the data out of HMIS, if too many people try running an APR at the same time, we don't want to slow down HMIS for the other people doing data entry. So it may ask you to try again in a few minutes, like James said. So the error message should explain that in a pretty clear way, indicating that it was just that HMIS is a little bit too busy to do the APR at the moment and to try again shortly. And if you continue to have that error, certainly let us know. We'll be monitoring to see how often that happens and make sure that it is not frequent. And of course, if there's any other errors that you get or problems you run into, error messages or something not working as you expect, then certainly let us know and we'll get on that as quickly as we can.
I just want to make a note or reiterate. Please check the HMIS ID numbers that they belong to your project. We have sometimes you merge and some IDs go away, or some IDs should have been there that's not there, and so on and so forth. Like this one, like Access has 2 IDs. Maybe it doesn't belong there anymore because they merged it and you don't need the second ID. I'm not ready. So I'm basing it based on the previous year stuff, and things could change year to year. So please check that and make sure that's correct. And then we'll fix that on, I have to fix it on Zengen because that imports over to this database.
Yeah, note that those will be the programs that are shown when you do the initial grant assessment review, where it shows all the HMIS projects that are thought to be associated with this grant. So when you confirm the project list to be accurate or not accurate, that at this stage would notify Housing Innovations that is not correct, so that could be taken care of. Right, do we have any other questions or comments available at the moment?
Well, I just want to point out, since the spending is going to be based on the last APR, which of data we pull. I'm not sure it's going to be showing in the system right now, but so some of it's going to be from the FY 2018 grants, and most of them are 2019. It's dependent on the cutoff date, and the cutoff date was, I'm trying to remember actually. I think it was if your grant operating year ended in October and we had everything in January, if all the APRs were done by January, they were plugged in. I think there was one grant that was a November end date, but they submitted the APR early, so they will be plugged in. But mostly the October end dates were the spending data that we have. So if anyone that had November and December, they're going to be based on the 2018 financial information. So it's a little bit of a timing issue of the like we always did. So I just wanted to reiterate that.
Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, I will add to this page is somewhere on here that will indicate what year the spending data was pulled from. Because right now, looking at this, you can't necessarily tell if it was from this year or the previous year. but I will make that show up on this page so it clearly identifies what year's spending data was being evaluated. And that way, if you have a question about that or don't think that was the correct year, you can let us know as a support request.
So I think if we have no more questions from our providers, then I think we're done. So do we have any other provider questions? Pretty quiet. All right.
They say no news is good news, so I guess that's a good thing.
Good news. Yeah, we are really super excited about this. We think it's gonna, I know in the beginning it can be hard with a new data system, but we have been using this system quite a bit in testing, and I think it's pretty intuitive. I think you guys hopefully are gonna find it useful to be able to see your scores in real time, and as you update your data, see how that impacts your score. So we hope that this is going to be a big improvement from the more manual ways that we used to do things. We know that it's going to remove a lot of user error from the process, because it really is just data systems talking to each other. So once we get like the few remaining kinks worked out, it really is going to be, I think, a big improvement. So we hope you guys agree. We're excited. And we thank, as I said before, our testers and our partners at Nutmeg really for making this happen. And you guys always for, for all the hard work that you are doing day in and day out to achieve really great outcomes on behalf of your clients.
Great.
Anything else you wanted to say, Adam? Folks at Nutmeg?
I believe that's it. Just, if anybody has any problems or questions, like I said, use the support thing. We'll be keeping an eye on it, especially over the next several days as people get in, to make sure any initial problems or questions or login things you may have are taken care of right away. So so we'll be keeping an eye on that.
And if you have ideas for different features that you'd like to see in the system, in the future, by all means, let us know that too, because our goal here is to have this be useful for you all.
Lauren beat me to that exactly. We want to hear your feedback, especially if maybe everything you wanted to do, but you have a few ideas. Do let us know, and we'll put it on the list and we'll actually talk about it.
Thank you, everybody.